Welcome, everyone. We're glad that you can join us today on our Connect, Learn, and Grow series titled Goal Guidance, Expert Answers to Your Burning Questions. We appreciate you taking the time today to talk about goal setting or goal guidance in the land of COVID and moving on to this next year. I wanted to just let you know my name is Nancy. I'll be moderating this session. If you have any questions for the panelists or for the presenters, please make sure to write those in the chat. If you have a question that comes up throughout, or you would like to engage or share some more information or questions, please raise your hand. I will call on you and unmute you. Today we have some help behind the scenes. If you have any technical issues along the way, please message me for technical help on the top. You'll see in the attendees, that's Steve. And then Jenna. Jenna's here to help any general questions you might have, or if you wanted to talk to her about any logistical questions in the session. Again, my name is Nancy, and I'm the moderator. We're going to move on and introduce you to our two fantastic hosts. Chris East is an organizational career development specialist within learning and talent development who helps build internal tools, systems, and spaces to help employees across campus engage more fully in their work. Along with Chris, we have Elizabeth Shrimp. She's a staff career educational counselor within the adult career and special student services who helps employees with any career-related issue, from understanding what works and doesn't work for you on the job to build and pursue long-term goals. Let me just stop sharing my slides. Sorry about that. Welcome, Chris and Elizabeth. Our first question today is, I'm overwhelmed in my life right now. How can I set small goals without adding even more stress to my daily life? Elizabeth, would you like to tackle that question and start us off?
Sure. Hello. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for being here today. So this is a great question, I think. We're all pretty overwhelmed right now. We've got a lot going on. Most of us are balancing multiple responsibilities in a way that we probably haven't had to for a very long time. I'm seeing Chris nodding as I say that. And one thing that I think is really helpful is to almost make your goals what we would call a micro goal. So you take, let me back up. When we think about goal setting, we often think very big picture. We try to think of goals that will have a lot of detail or a lot of specificity around them. And I think when you're feeling really overwhelmed, one way to navigate that, one way I help clients and I myself navigate that, is to make everything as small and specific as possible. When I read this question, I immediately thought of something that I actually do in my daily life. I've even got it in front of me. It's an action item notepad that says today's plan of attack. And I just list tasks on there. I think by navigating my goals and taking these bigger picture ideas and breaking them down into simple questions like, what am I going to get done today? What are my most important things that have to get done today? What are somewhat important things that I would really like to get done today? And then what are the things that I know are just not going to happen this week or today? And then I can shift those to a future date. And that way I have some kind of benchmark for myself that helps me move forward and helps me accomplish things. And it also manages that stress a little more effectively. I'm not worrying about what I'm doing 6 months from now. I'm worrying about what I'm going to do today, what is important today. And then another really effective strategy, I think, is to end each day, this is a very counseling focused idea, is to end each day with a reflection on what was really difficult for me and what was really easy. And then after a few days of that or a week of that, looking at trends. My example I made notes for myself on was, if eating really healthy was really difficult this week, is there a goal I can write that would change that? That's not necessarily a professional goal. But you could do the same thing with work. If there's a particular work task that you're finding really difficult, that you're finding really overwhelming, and you notice that every day at the end of your workday, you know, staying on top of connecting with your team was really difficult. If that was constantly the struggle you faced, build a goal around that. And again, you're starting with the stressor. You're starting with, this is something that I'm having a hard time with, recognizing that trend, and then turning that into an action item, rather than starting with an action item that only makes you feel more overwhelmed. Yeah, that was what spoke to me when I first saw that. And I see in the comments, Rich is saying his new word is progress. As long as you made progress, you feel successful. And I think that's exactly it, Rich. Some days you get a pebble, some days you get a wheelbarrow, but baby steps are still steps forward. Recently we got Disney Plus, and we've been watching Frozen 2, and the whole theme of the movie is doing the next right thing. And so it's a lot of, I can't navigate what I'm doing 6 months from now, but I can navigate what I'm doing today. I can do the next right thing for me right now. Chris, wanna jump in with any thoughts?
Yeah, I think for sure chunking things out more short term. I mean, many of us put pride in sort of long-term goals, and there was a sense that those could be accomplished. When we take the long term out of it, because we really have to today, we don't know what next month is going to look like work-wise or personal-wise. It's a lot of unpredictability. So if we just need to take it back and really look at week to week or day to day. I mean, that could be a big adjustment for many of you, watching today and listening, because there's some sense of accomplishment if you can set things longer term. But the big shift is now really accepting that the short term is okay. And really, like you said, taking what you can control and what you can do, and accepting that. And for some of us, it's going to take a little time to accept that, but you'll probably find that you can accomplish more in that mode. So, I think for sure the long term is very difficult, and so we just have to bring it back. Because we can get back to the long term, but it's going to be a little bit for us to do that. It might be 2021 until we can really get a sense of predictability.
Mm-hmm. And that's where I think you touched on this, Chris. I think the idea of giving yourself a little bit of compassion too, and forgiving yourself for not always having a wheelbarrow full of rocks, like Rich mentioned in the comments. Allowing yourself the grace to have a pebble, and that's success today. Is I got one thing done. I knocked one item off my to-do list. And I think too, like you mentioned, the longer term goals, looking at those trends. Maybe your long-term goal has to shift. Maybe there's a trend that you notice that would be really valuable as a long-term goal. And once you notice the individual daily stressors that are causing a problem, by recognizing this was difficult for me today, over time you can say, oh, there's a bigger solution that could deal with this. There's a bigger solution that could address this problem. And so really giving yourself the compassion to take every day at a time, and then noticing any trends in your life without feeling the need to change everything, just seeing what's happening right now, seeing it and recognizing it and saying, is there something I could change long term that would make this easier and relieve some of this stress? And maybe there isn't, but it could, it's not going to be known until you notice the patterns. Any other thoughts from the group?
Well, I was just thinking about trends when you mentioned that, Elizabeth. I've been noticing trends throughout my, I call soar or sink days. Sometimes I'm really soaring and sometimes I'm really sinking, and really paying attention to those of, why am I soaring in these tasks and why am I sinking in these tasks? And, how do I spend more time on the sinking ones, or say, okay, on Thursday afternoons, I'm going to do these tasks because it seems that I am accomplishing those, or I need more time to think strategically on these goals.
Yeah.
One other thing that Chris mentioned kind of made me think about it. I've created these Post-its since March 17th when some of us left campus. And my Post-it is, I don't know if you can see, it says, take what you need and leave the rest. And I think about that a lot with goal settings, because often I assume I know a lot of high achievers, and we all have a lot of goals, I say, under the surface that people don't know about, and really what matters. And what are the big rocks that you want to take forward that will impact your career, impact your goals, impact your success, and others. So those are just some things that really stuck with me in this conversation, your responses. Does anyone from the participants, you guys have any ideas or thoughts or comments for the experts? And feel free to raise your hand at any time or add a comment in chat.
Yeah. I'm just going to throw those action items up in chat if that's okay.
Perfect.
Give yourself some action items daily. You want to, so let's give action items daily, recognize trends, and recognize trends in your productivity so that you can form those larger goals that can address those little daily. And then forgive yourself.
All right, we'll move on to the next question, and then feel free, if anything comes up, add them into the chat. Next question from our survey was, how do I talk to staff about goal setting when we are partially furloughed, position specific, and they are in survival mode, worrying about paying the bills, insurance, and wondering if the feds are going to continue with unemployment? Would you like to start us off in that very true and real question?
Yeah, I'll start. This is a challenging one for many leaders on campus who are really concerned about their staff and their their limited resources or their impact of their resources, both personal and professionally. I think first off, by asking the question, specifically, if you're hearing certain limitations or things that are changing, you should ask how is that impacting your peers, or how is it impacting your staff, and be open about that and say, hey, I'd like to really know, is this is this an impact? Can you please explain, how this is? And of course, setting goals at this point is not a priority. It's more of understanding the situation and the impact of certain changes. I mean, there's federal changes, there's organizational changes, there are university changes. I mean, there's a lot of things, and a leader may not be able to answer all the questions, but I think it's really important that we ask what impact it's having of individuals around sort of the things they would like to accomplish. And it's kind of getting the sort of the elephant, out of the box kind of thing, and sort of saying, are there things that are impacting your ability to put together productivity or put together some things that you want to accomplish? Really having that conversation, and instead of assuming that individuals are going to be able to manage this and figure it out. We're all adults, and having the attitude that, well, yep, this is all impacting everybody, so everyone's got to figure this out. Well, this impact is individual. It's individually impacting others at different levels, and so we have to sort of assess what that's like and being compassionate about that. So really, having that conversation, again, it could be changing weekly. I'm hearing leaders really asking those questions, putting work aside, but just saying, look, this is what's happening at the university level. Tell me how this is impacting you. How are you feeling about this change? And so having some of those, it might be kind of hard to have that conversation, but I would, as a leader, want to know that up front versus hearing about it much later and impacting a whole variety of additional things that would be very challenging. So that's how I feel about that. That is a tough one, and it's a changing landscape. But keeping that conversation about those issues, I think, are important. I don't know, Elizabeth, you probably.
Yeah, no, I agree. Keeping the conversation open. If supervisors are asking those open-ended questions, help me understand your situation more. I think that's great advice, a great way to navigate that. If I had a client who was asking this question, saying, I'm having a hard time setting my own goals because I'm dealing with all of these other sort of the Maslow's hierarchy. I'm worried about my finances. I'm worried about losing my house. How do I set a professional goal? I have bigger problems. This is advice that we normally steer away from. I'm going to fly in the face of everything you and I have been saying for years, Chris, and say I would encourage that client to go back to the supervisor and ask about supervisor mission-based goals. Normally we say supervisors should try not to set goals for their staff, and they should not impose their will on a staff person. And I certainly don't want to encourage a supervisor to impose their will in a dictatorial fashion. But if you're working with a staff person and they're having a very hard time setting their own professional goals, and yet goals need to be set, I would say one approach you could take would be to as the supervisor, to look at what the department's mission is, look at what the overall big picture is for the work, and break that down into individually manageable components, and then invite the employee to take that on as a goal. So rather than saying, well, I'm going to say your goal is to do X, Y, and Z, maybe saying, I'm understanding that you're having a hard time thinking about this right now. It sounds like life is really overwhelming. What if we made this a goal, and offering that as an option? I think when I coach staff through having that conversation with their employer, it's usually with the intention that this makes sure that the employee has some kind of tangible action item goal without putting the burden of navigating that situation on the employee. And then, like you said, I would echo everything about maintaining that conversation and an open-ended question. And whether or not that goal is realistically attainable would then be a conversation between the employee and the supervisor. But it's hard. It's hard to coach someone through thinking of those higher level needs when their mind is just focused on something else. And that happens to the best of us. Especially right now, it's happening to a lot of people. A lot of work teams on campus are facing some real change, and that's hard.
Yes, I think it's what I found from leaders and kind of what they're talking through is just, making sure they have resources that may be able to support individuals who are really struggling. In addition, because I had one supervisor say, you know what, I don't have all the answers. And they tend to come to their next line of leadership for help. If the relationship is stable and good and trusting, but managers and leaders don't have all the answers. And however, they definitely want to be able to support their staff. And so, having a good bank of resources, and I think the university does as much as they can to inform what resources we have and what opportunities we have to help and support. It's what I'm seeing as kind of the trend is making sure people do have help, and it may not be the manager or leader that supplies the help or actually does help, but they can refer or work with others to gain some support. So I think that's really important too.
Yeah. Even to just create a space where someone could brainstorm or vent those frustrations. it can be great, I think, for a manager to, if they're dealing with an employee who is really having a hard time focusing on work, giving them that safe space to say, this is really hard for me right now. This is something that I'm struggling with right now. The manager may not have to solve the problem, just to be a listening, sympathetic ear who can hear the problem and acknowledge that it is difficult, and acknowledge that now is a really tough time and this is going to be difficult for folks. And I think that that's sometimes the most helpful thing you can do, is just listen. We do put a lot on each other to solve problems, I think. And I think the folks that make good managers are often people who are very solution oriented, which is a very positive thing. It's a good thing in a manager. But it does sometimes put pressure on ourselves to have all the answers. And I agree, Chris, managers don't always have the answers, and they're not always supposed to.
Some really good thoughts from both of you. I'm reflecting off of just a sense of vulnerability, need for managers and employees at this time, kind of in my head, in this listening aspect, this deep listening. Also, what I've noticed in the last 4 or 5 months is a sense of community that is slowly getting built. And so I know that I often feel I have to solve the problems on my own. I know there's great resources out there, the Campus Supervisors Network that Rich oversees, coordinates. Really lean on communities, or reach out to us, and we can help find your community, a community to build support in these challenging times, to find solutions. Yes, and last thing that jogged my mind is going back to the first question: small steps, small goals. What needs to be healed and fixed before we move on, and through that hierarchy of needs of health and safety, and then wellness and goal setting. That is going to be challenging in this next year, and more than I have seen in 20 years on campus. And so it's creating those resources that you're not alone. I welcome anyone from the participants to raise their hand or put something in chat if they want to have any ideas or thoughts on that question before we move on to the next question.
I would say too, while folks are writing and thinking, Nancy, something you said jogged my memory. All growth doesn't have to be growth. All goals don't have to be growth oriented. I think we get very focused. Our society is a very growth oriented society. And of course there is a time for that, and career progression is usually focused on growth, and that's a big component of that. But I use plant metaphors for this a lot. Not every plant is a tree. And not every tree is spending every minute of its existence growing bigger and getting taller. There are times when trees calm down and regenerate. There are plants that grow that are not upward hierarchical sort of growth models. And I think remembering that it's okay to have a goal that is more sustainable in a time when growth might be difficult. That's okay. It's okay to have to have a goal that is maintaining the status quo during a tough time. It doesn't always have to be doing more. And I see a comment about creating a shared document for individual weekly goals and progress, and how helpful that's been. Our team has a similar one. Jay Collins, I'm not sure what your first name is, sorry.
I think it's
our team has a similar process where we have a shared document with individual progress, and going all the way back to question 1, like Nancy had alluded to, sometimes it's a pebble. Hi, Joan.
Yeah, I agree too. I was thinking also how far we've come since March, and really appreciating those milestones. So thank you so much, John, for bringing that up. Such a great idea of kind of recognizing and then being okay. Like I know Jen and we do planning action every Monday, and where we're going to go this week, next week, and 3 months from now, and that's always evolving. And having those goals and doing a check-in is really helpful. So thank you for sharing that.
Yep. Even little things. One of my action items to do that I haven't yet done today is to check my voicemail every day. It's a very little goal. Meredith says her goals have been largely personal toward being okay with a work-life balance. I think that's great. Finding that work-life balance, that's a great goal. And if your goal is to stay productive in a new environment, that is change and that is growth, and that does make you a more well-rounded professional. Chris, thoughts?
Yeah, well, I would definitely, the whole personal side, I think what's really helped me during this change is I have shared some of the personal, some of the things you may not share with your leader or who manages you as much, but I've been pretty trusting to share things that have changed, things that have impacted, my thinking or what I'm struggling with, and it may be work related or it may not, but my supervisor and manager has been very thankful to know what some of the additional challenges have been. It may not, it may not never show up in your work or show up, normally, but I think now's the time to kind of talk through this a little bit more. And again, it takes a relationship to do that. But if you're feeling not so great that week, it's good to kind of let people know and be honest. I know it's a vulnerability piece, but I think people are pretty compassionate overall and know this is a very different experience for a lot of folks. And so I've just found that to be good. I feel good that other people kind of know, or I might share with a peer. Just a side comment after a meeting, I might go, how are things going? Or are there things that you're struggling with, or are things that are successful? It's not always the negative. I always like to see how are people working through things. So, yeah, and our staff has really stayed positive, which has been great. But I know there are challenges within our staff as well and how they're working. But we're trying to kind of let people know how things are going. And that honesty, I think, helps get us through some difficult times.
I agree. Yep. Vulnerability, honesty, finding the thing that works and making it work for you.
Well, thank you, Meredith, and for sharing that. And I would say that one of my life goals was to be on an island somewhere reading a book. But now my life goal is just to have an hour of quiet to read email in my balance of work life. So maybe some of you can empathize with that. I just crave even 30 minutes of silence with my new coworkers. But I digress. I really appreciate Chris's comment about shifting goals, because that kind of goes into our third question, which is, and I'm currently I just had this, and many of you may have this. My PMDP is coming up soon, and I'm having a hard time setting goals because I'm happy where I'm at and what I'm doing. How do I set up goals if I don't really want anything to change? And, I do appreciate this question, and I also think about it in another lens of growth is not always, our goals aren't always growth. Sometimes it's a lateral. And I know that I am thinking about my goals of, okay, I'm not going to grow per se, but what am I learning this last year to, move forward with my PMDP? So I'm opening that up to both of our fantastic presenters who would like to tackle that question.
I guess I can go.
Oh, cool. Go ahead.
Sorry. I can go first. It's just funny because I'm having my meeting tomorrow with my supervisor, so I'm thinking about it a lot. So I think the big thing is to relook. To look at what has been accomplished. I think is really important because I said this from the start. Once we kind of hit this change in March and April, is to really we went through a lot of new, unexpected learning. And so what I mean by that is we had to shift how we delivered our services, right? We're a service industry. We had to shift overnight. And did we really record that shift very well? No, because we were in the middle of doing it, right? We did it. Whether it's learning new technologies, whether it's figuring out how to deliver a new service, whether it's how to communicate with others in a different way, it's how to assist, how to get to meetings and maintain the project flow, whatever it is, you have done a lot of different things. And so by getting ready for your annual review, you really should have a kind of a list of the things that you had to change, that you had to learn, or that it doesn't have to be like all detailed, but you should say, you know what, I had to learn. An example for me, I deliver services through a training mechanism, right? And so all that was face to face. Now I had to learn a whole new system of Blackboard, Collaborate. I had to learn a system of WebEx because that was our initial. So there's WebEx, Collaborate, Blackboard, Zoom, because there's other services of Zoom. That's just platform. These are just platforms of communication, and there's a fourth. I can't remember right now. But so those are skills that I had to learn and gain and work through, and that's just communication. So my recommendation is to just do a pre-assessment before you start thinking future. Just reflect back on the last 4 months of what shifts you've had to make and document that and have that a part of the conversation, because there are things that you've gained that you really are excited about. There are things that you did that was okay, and there were things that you did that was really tough, right? And maybe still tough. Those are things you should document and have a conversation and say, well, what would I like to continue? What do I still need to work on? And that's not really looking at anything else other than the past 4 months. And I think you'll find that strategy to be very rewarding, and you can kind of pump yourself up a little bit and go, look, this is what I had to do. And your manager may not, and supervisor may not even have kind of put that all together. And so it just allows you to kind of show your shift and what you had to do. So I highly encourage that strategy.
Absolutely. I love that strategy. I was thinking when you were talking, I've used this example a lot in my previous role before I came to UW. I spent about 3/4 of every day doing data management, and I hated it. I just hated it. It was my least favorite thing to do. I hated being in spreadsheets. I hated dealing with them all day. And it never occurred to me that spending about 1.5 years of my life doing that taught me a lot about how to use these tools. And when I came to my role here, one of the reasons I was hired was because they wanted someone who knew how to build a spreadsheet. And in my interview, I remember asking, well, how much of that am I supposed to do every month? I think I might have said every day, and my now boss kind of laughed and said, probably about a half a day a month you'll be dealing with data. And that was perfectly fine. And in retrospect, it turns out there was a lot that I learned in that job about how to use these tools and how to engage with technology that then translated into some professional goals in terms of learning how to use other tools like Qualtrics or Google Forms, other tools that would use technology to get us really reliable data on programming and metrics so that we could report that more effectively. It was never something that I would say I really love doing. It's probably never going to be something I want to be a major part of my job, but it is a skill that I was so focused on not wanting to do every day, I had forgotten to notice how much about it I'd learned and where I could take that learning and say, well, if I don't mind doing it a little bit, what if I could learn to use these tools more effectively? I also wrote a note for myself. I've said this before. I like to use a 3-plant sort of analogy for growth. You have your tree growth, which is the hierarchy we always think of. It's I'm going up this ladder, and it's a tree that grows up and then spreads. You have a strawberry growth, which never really goes up. Strawberries are not a hierarchy. they grow out, they spread, and they cover more ground. And so if you're a strawberry, maybe you don't want to be a manager. Maybe you don't want to change your position and move up a ladder, but maybe you want to cover what you're doing on a wider scale. Maybe you could take on a bigger project or take on something that covers a larger percentage of your work team. And then you have tulips, which are regenerative. If you are like me and have tulip bulbs, I noticed one year that they come up at a certain point in the year and they really thrive and they really shine. And then they sort of fall back for part of the year and they become a very minimal, very unnoticed, sort of glossed over part of the garden. But every year they become a little stronger. Every year they get a little bit better. Every year there might be one or two more. So it's not aggressive growth in that it's growing out or it's growing up, but it is really focused on something that gets better every year. And every year it comes back and does even better than it did the year before. And maybe that's you. Maybe, like Chris said, you're learning those tools and technologies so that you're always the go-to person in the office who has the answers to the question. And you never get stuck in the technology from 10 years ago. Maybe you're the person that takes on similar projects that are very related to what you're doing, but the project always has a slightly different scope or a slightly different angle. Maybe you're a person who does eventually want to grow up and there's something that you can do like a learning and talent development course, like a Thrive or a Fully Prepared to Lead set of courses where you could develop yourself as a person and an employee without necessarily changing anything about your role in the immediate future. All of those are good options, and none of them involve change in the immediate future. They're all sort of, I like what I'm doing now, I just want to do it better.
Yep. I like the flower analogy. I'm a big gardener, so that was pretty cool. Nancy, did you want to say a few things? I see your picture up.
Oh, I was just smiling because I kill plants all the time. So I wonder how that relates to my goals and being action oriented. So that I was just smiling in the background. Yes, while I'm chatting it up, Elizabeth will add that. One of our final questions and comments, do you have anything you'd like to share or ask? Each of the presenters, hosts will be just doing some summarizing their final thoughts on goal setting, some helpful tips, and also share some resources. We'll have that also on our website. So as they close up today's session, feel free to add any questions or comments you'd like to hear from them. I'll give it to Chris first.
Oh, okay, thanks, Nancy. So the big focus is we want obviously goals to work for you at whatever given time and be flexible with that. You've heard the old saying, as long as you're goal orientated, you'll get things done. Well, it needs to work for you, and it needs to work for setting the goals for, whether it's for yourself personally or for someone in your organization as a leader. It's great for you to definitely write those down and share those goals before you kind of commit to them, so that you've got some perspective from others, whether it's a peer or a leader. Please share those. And then what's nice is if you can build some accountabilities into your goals. And it doesn't mean like, are you going to get those done? It's more of someone maybe checking in and saying, you know what, you set this goal to do X. How's it going? Are you progressing? A manager type person, there might be things that they can get out of your way, right? Because they have the power to maybe change some things to help you move to that goal. And so that's really important if things are getting in the way of your own goals. And so making sure you share your progress. I do like the SMART goal. We've all heard about SMART goals, and I think it's a good way to get your thoughts down on paper. It's a great way to share your goals. It's just I wouldn't recommend getting locked into them, because given our situation, goals are shifting. But I'd always recommend sharing your goals, being open about them, and adjusting to them as needed, because and then acknowledge that you've accomplished them, and be proud of that. And so just don't think it's another thing to do, but be proud, and let people know that you were able to do X or Y, and then you'll be able to kind of build upon it. So don't let goal setting be a scary thing. Make it work for you, and the big thing is be able to articulate what those are, so people can help you accomplish those. So good luck with them, and I think you'll have a good start for sure.
Mm-hmm. And I would say document, document, document. Chris mentioned this. I mentioned this. Nancy mentioned this. Write down what you're doing. Make notes for yourself on what you're working on or where you've been. Look at previous performance management. Before I write my goals for this year, I go back and look at last year's goals and see, have I grown? What kinds of growth have I done? And make notes for yourself, even if it's as minor as, this is something that I did today that went well. This is something that I did today that didn't go well. And then that gives you the power to look back and see those trends. That gives you the power to go back and report to a leader, be it management or someone higher up. This is what I've accomplished. This is where I've come. And right now, I think be gentle with yourself about mixing that personal and professional life. Maybe one of the things that you've realized about your professional life right now, one thing I realized about myself was I need to limit screen time. When I'm working on campus at my office, I'm spending most of my day sitting face to face with people and not on a screen. And that really messed with me once I started working remotely. And so part of my professional development, in order to stay engaged as a counselor with my clients, in order to be present in my appointments with the people who needed my help, was to limit how much screen time I got. And so I talked to my boss about ways that we could do that. And that turned into a professional goal for myself, was learning about things and learning with methods and tools that didn't involve as much screen time and involved more paper books and things like podcasts. That only came about because I was able to have that conversation. I was able to document what was going well and what was I struggling with, and then I was able to take that and have that conversation with a supervisor. And so everything Chris just said, documenting what you're doing, making notes for yourself, recording what's working and what's not, and then having those conversations with the people around you, be they people in your personal life, peers in your professional life, or folks above you in leadership roles, is a really critical part of finding what's going to work as a goal, writing out those SMART goals, writing out goals using any goal setting formula you like, and then accomplishing them through action steps.
Well,
Agreed.
yes. I want to just throw out there that, we are a strong community when we are together. And even though some of us are virtual, please let us know how we can help support you in your goal setting or your career development. And even if you would like access to connect with someone else, please email us at the conferences at ohr.wisc.edu. One thing that I reflect upon the last 5 months of how many connections I made that I wouldn't have made because of COVID. There's a huge network within the university, and I can help you connect with people that you would share goals with, or are struggling with working with employees, or want to share successes. Let us know. We're here to help and support. I'd like to thank Chris and Elizabeth for joining us on this journey. I would also recommend going back to their podcasts in the Connect, Learn, and Grow series for any good resources. We will follow up with an email. This has been recorded, so if you wanted to send it to somebody or know someone who would like to listen to this, we will have that. And any closing thoughts? Any other thoughts today? Well, I hope you enjoy the rest of your Wednesday.
Thank you for having us.